All right. Welcome back to another story time session with your favorite demon slayer, Shia Fire. Um, so, more on Doomsday. Yes, it is I, Dr. Doomet. So today we're talking about the barrier or the gate that none can pass. Some omens and whatnot. I'm going to be reading from this is tota.world. It's called the Mesopotamian Taboos and Omens. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Repent. For this is the end. So this is from Myths and Legends of Babylonia and Assyria by Lewis Spence of 1916. So the belief in taboo was universal in ancient Chaldea. Amongst the Babylonians, it was known as Mamit. There were taboos on many things, but especially upon corpses and uncleanness of all kinds. We find the taboo generally alluded to in a text as the barrier that none can pass. Among all barbarous peoples, the taboo is usually intended to hedge in the sacred thing from the the profane person or the common people, but it may also be employed for sanitary reasons. Thus, the flesh of certain animals, such as the pig, may not be eaten in hot countries. Food must not be prepared by those who are in the slightest degree suspected of uncleanness, and these laws are usually of the most rigorous character. But should a man violate the taboo placed upon certain foods, then he himself often became taboo. No one might have any intercourse with him. He was left to his own devices and, in short, became a sort of pariah. In the Assyrian text, we find many instances of this kind of taboo, and numerous were the supplications that these might be removed. If one drank water from an unclean cup, he had violated a taboo. Like the Arab, he might not lick the platter clean. If he were taboo, he might not touch another man. He might not converse with him. He might not pray to the gods. He might not even be interceded for by anyone else. In fact, he was excommunicated. If a man cast his eye upon water which another person had washed his hands in, or if he came into contact with a person who had not yet performed his ablutions, he became unclean. An entire purification ritual was incumbent on any Assyrian who touched or even looked upon a dead man. It may be asked, wherefore was this elaborate cleanliness essential to avoid taboo? The answer undoubtedly is because of the belief in the power of sympathetic magic. Did one come into contact with a person who was in any way unclean, or with a corpse or other unpleasant object, he was supposed to come within the radius of the evil which emanated from it. Popular superstitions. The superstition that the evil eye of a witch or a wizard might bring blight upon an individual or community was as persistent in Chaldea as elsewhere. Incantations frequently allude to it as among the causes of sickness and exorcisms were duly directed against it. Even today, on the site of the ruins of Babylon, children are protected against it by fastening small blue objects to their headgear. Just as mold from a grave was supposed by the witches of the Middle Ages to be particularly efficacious in magic, so was the dust of the temple supposed to possess hidden virtue in Assyria. If one pared one's nails or cut one's hair, it was considered necessary to bury them, lest a sorcerer should discover them and use them against their late owner. For a sorcery performed upon a part was by the law of sympathetic magic thought to reflect upon the whole. A like superstition attached to the discarded clothing of people. For among barbarian or uncultured folk, the apparel is regarded as part and parcel of the man. Even in our own time, simple and uneducated people tear a piece from their garments and hang it as an offering on the bushes around any of the numerous healing wells in the country that they may have journeyed to. This is a survival of the custom of sacrificing the part for the whole. If one desired to get rid of a headache, one had to take the hair of a young kid and give it to a wise woman who would spin it on the right side and double it on the left. Then it was to be bound into 14 knots and the incantation of Ea pronounced upon it, after which it was to be bound round the head and neck of the sick man. For defects in eyesight, the Assyrians wove black and white threads or hairs together, muttering incantations the while, and these were placed upon the eyes. It was thought, too, that the tongues of evil spirits or sorcerers could be bound, and that a net, because of its many knots, was efficacious in keeping evilly disposed magicians away. Omens. Divination, as practiced by means of augury, was a rite of the first importance among the Babylonians and Assyrians. This was absolutely distinct from divination by astrology. The favorite method of augury among the Chaldeans of old was that by examination of the liver of a slaughtered animal. It was thought that when an animal was offered up in sacrifice to a god, that the deity identified himself for the time being with that animal, and that the beast thus afforded a means of indicating the wishes of the god. Now, among people in a primitive state of culture, the soul is almost invariably supposed to reside in the liver instead of in the heart or brain. More blood is secreted by the liver than by any other organ in the body, and upon the opening of a carcass, it appears the most striking, the most central, and the most sanguinary of the vital parts. The liver was, in fact, supposed by early peoples to be the fountain of the blood supply and therefore of life itself. Hepatoscopy, or divination from the liver, was undertaken by the Chaldeans for the purpose of determining what the gods had in mind. The soul of the animal became for the nonce the soul of the god. Therefore, if the signs of the liver of the sacrificed animal could be read, the mind of the god became clear, and his intentions regarding the future were known. The animal usually sacrificed was a sheep, the liver of which animal is most complicated in appearance. The two lower lobes are sharply divided from one another and are separated from the upper by a narrow depression, and the whole surface is covered with markings and fissures, lines and curves which give it much the appearance of a map on which roads and valleys are outlined. This applies to the freshly excised liver only, and these markings are never the same in any two livers. Certain priests were set apart for the practice of liver reading, and these were exceedingly expert, being able to decipher the hepatoscopic signs with great skill. They first examined the gallbladder, which might be reduced or swollen. They inferred various circumstances from the several ducts and the shapes and sizes of the lobes and their appendices. Diseases of the liver, too, particularly common among sheep in all countries, were even more frequent among these animals in the marshy portions of the Euphrates Valley. Liverpool. The literature connected with this species of augury is very extensive, and Ashurbanipal's library contained thousands of fragments describing the omens deduced from the practice. These enumerate the chief appearances of the liver as the shade of the color of the gall, the length of the ducts, and so forth. The lobes were divided into sections, lower, medial, and higher, and the interpretation varied from the phenomena therein observed. The markings on the liver possess various names such as palaces, weapons, paths, and feet, which terms remind us somewhat of the bizarre nomenclature of astrology. Later in the progress of the art, the various combinations of signs came to be known so well, and there were so many cuneiform. This is inscribed with magical formula. It was probably used for purposes of divination and was employed by the priests of Babylon in their ceremonies text in existence, which afforded instruction in them that a liver could be quickly read by the baru or reader, a name which was afterward applied to the astrologists as well and to those who divined through various other natural phenomena. One of the earliest instances on record of hepatoscopy is that regarding Naram Sin, who consulted a sheep's liver before declaring war. The great Sargon did likewise, and we find Gudea applying to his liver inspectors when attempting to discover a favorable time for laying the foundations of the temple of Ningersu. Throughout the whole history of the Babylonian monarchy, in fact, from its early beginnings to its end, we find this system in vogue. Whether it was enforced in Sumerian times, we have no means of knowing, but there is every likelihood that such was the case. Now, who was the first liverologist in America? The first liver surgery? Liver surgeon. Okay, so the first liver surgeon, Dr. Thomas E. Starles, is considered the first surgeon to perform a human liver transplant in 1963 while working at the University of Colorado. Starles was a VA transplant surgeon and research scientist for over 50 years and is often called the father of transplantation. In 1967, he performed the first successful liver transplant in which the patient survived for more than a year. In 1984, Starles also performed the first simultaneous heart and liver transplant. Okay, Starles' interest in liver transplants began in 1956 when he conducted experiments with dogs to test his theory that diabetes was caused by the liver, not the pancreas. Although he was wrong, these experiments helped lead to the first human liver transplants 7 years later. Now, back to the the barrier gate. Let's see. Okay, this is, read this little article from Reddit. The monster that lurks in Indian country, anti-blackness. White passing. It's giving the imitation of life. Okay, back to this. Chapter 10, the magic and demonology of Babylonia and Assyria. Again, these things will overlap. So this is myths and legends of Babylonia and Assyria. Okay. Let's see, is it the same stuff? Okay, we're just going to read from the top. So, like other primitive races, the peoples of Chaldea scarcely discriminated at all between religion and magic. One difference between the priest and the sorcerer was that the one employed magic for religious purposes, whilst the other used it for his own ends. The literature of Chaldea, especially its religious literature, teems with references to magic. And in its spells and incantations, we see the prototypes of those employed by the magicians of medieval Europe. Indeed, so closely do some of the Assyrian incantations and magical practices resemble those of the European sorcerers of the Middle Ages and of primitive peoples of the present day that it is difficult to convince oneself that they are of independent origin. In Chaldea, as in ancient Egypt, the crude and vague magical practices of primeval times received form and developed into accepted ritual, just as early religious ideas evolved into dogmas under the stress of theological controversy and opinion. As there were men who would dispute upon religious questions, so were there persons who would discuss matters magical. This is not to say that the terms religion and magic possessed any well-defined boundaries for them, nor is it at all clear that they do for us in this 20th century. They overlap, and it has long been the belief of the writer that their relations are but represented by two circles which intersect one another and the areas of which partially coincide. The writer has outlined his opinions regarding the origin of magic in an earlier volume of this series and has little to add to what he then wrote, except that he desires to lay stress upon the identification of early religion and magic. It is only when they began to evolve, to branch out, that the two systems present differences. If there is any one circumstance which accentuates the difference more than another, it is that the ethical element does not enter into magic in the same manner as it does into religion. That Chaldean magic was the precursor of European medieval magic, as apart from popular sorcery and witchcraft, is instanced not only by the similarity between the systems, but by the introduction into medieval magic of the names of Babylonian and Assyrian gods and magicians. Again and again is Babylon appealed to even more frequently than Egypt, and we meet constantly with the names of Beelzebub, Ishtar, as Astarte, Baal, and Moloch, whilst the names of demons, obviously of Babylonian origin, are encountered in almost every work on the subject. Frequent allusions are also made to the quote-unquote wise men and necromancers of Babylon, and to the, quote, stargazers of Chaldea. The conclusion is irresistible that ceremonial magic as practiced in the Middle Ages owed much to that of Babylon. Our information regarding Chaldean magic is much more complete than that which we possess concerning the magic of ancient Egypt. Hundreds of spells, incantations, and omen inscriptions have been recovered, and these not only enlighten us regarding the class of priests who practice magic, but they tell us of the several varieties of demons, ghosts, and evil spirits. They minutely describe the Babylonian witch and wizard, and they picture for us many magical ceremonies, besides informing us of the names of scores of plants and flowers possessing magical properties, of magical substances, jewels, amulets, and the like. Also, they speak of sortilege, or the divination of the future, of the drawing of magical circles, of the exorcism of evil spirits, and the casting out of demons. The roots of science. In these Babylonian magical records, we have by far the most complete picture of the magic of the ancient world. It is a wondrous story that is told by those bricks and cylinders of stamped clay, the story of civilized man's first gropings for light. For in these venerable writings, we must recognize the first attempts at scientific elucidation of the forces by which man is surrounded. Science, like religion, has its roots deep in magic. The primitive man believes implicitly in the efficacy of magical ritual, what it brings about once it can bring about again if the proper conditions be present and recognized. Thus, it possesses for the barbarian as much of the element of certainty as the scientific process does for the chemist or the electrician. Given certain causes, certain effects must follow. Surely then, in the barbarous mind, magic is pseudo-scientific, of the nature of science. There appears a deeper gloom, a more ominous spirit of the ancient and the obscure in the magic of old Mesopotamia than in that of any other land. Its mighty sanctuaries, its sky-aspiring towers, seemed founded upon this belief in the efficacy of the spoken spell, the reiterated invocation. Thousands of spirits, various and grotesque, the parents of the ghosts and goblins of a later day, haunt the purlieus of the temple, battening upon the remains of sacrifice, the leavings of the gorged gods, flit through the night-bound streets, and disturb the rest of the dwellers in houses. Demons with claw and talon, vampires, ghouls, all are there. Spirits blessed and unblessed, jinn, witch hags, lemurs, sorrowing, unburied ghosts. No type of supernatural being appears to have been unknown to the imaginative Semites of old Chaldea. These must all be laid or exorcised or placated, and it is not to be marveled at that in such circumstances the trade of the necromancer flourished exceedingly. The witch or wizard, however, the unprofessional and detached practitioner with no priestly status, must be aware. He or she was regarded with suspicion, and if one fell sick of a strange wasting or a disease to which he could not attach a name, the nearest sorcerer, male or female, real or imaginary, was in all probability brought to book. Priestly wizards. There were at least two classes of priests who dealt in the occult: the Baru, or seers, and the Asipu, or wizards. The caste of the Baru was a very ancient one, dating at least from the time of Hammurabi. The Baru performed divination by consulting the livers of animals and also by observation of the flight of birds. We find many of the kings of Babylonia consulting this class of soothsayer. Sennacherib, for example, sought from the Baru the cause of his father's violent death. The Asipu, on the other hand, was the remover of taboo and bans of all sorts. He chanted the rites described in the magical text and performed the ceremony of atonement. It is he that stilleth all to rest, that pacifieth all, by whose incantations everything is at peace. The gods are upon his right hand and his left. They are behind and before him. The wizard and the witch were known as Kasapu or Kasaptu. These were the sorcerers or magicians proper, and that they were considered dangerous to the community is shown by the manner in which they are treated by the code of Hammurabi, in which it is ordained that he who charges a man with sorcery and can justify the charge shall obtain the sorcerer's house, and the sorcerer shall plunge into the river. But if the sorcerer be not drowned, then he who accused him shall be put to death, and the wrongly accused man shall have his house. A series of texts known as Maklu provides us, among other things, with a striking picture of the Babylonian witch. It tells how she prowls the streets, searching for victims, snatching love from handsome men, and withering beauteous women. At another time, she is depicted sitting in the shade of the wall, making spells and fashioning images. The suppliant prays that her magic may revert upon herself, that the image of her which he has made, and doubtless rendered into the hands of the priest, shall be burnt by the fire god, that her words may be forced back into her mouth. May her mouth be fat, may her tongue be salt, continues the prayer. The Haltapan plant, along with sesame, is sent against her. O witch, like the circlet of this seal, may thy face grow green and yellow. An Assyrian text says of a sorceress that her bounds are the whole world, that she can pass over all mountains. The writer states that near his door he has posted a servant. On the right and left of his door has he set Lugal, Gira, and Alamu, that they might kill the witch. The library of Assurbanipal contains many cuneiform tablets dealing with magic, but there are also extant many magical tablets of the later Babylonian Empire. These were known to the Babylonians by some name or word, indicative perhaps of the special sphere of their activities. Thus, we have the Maklu, or burning, Serpu, the consuming, Utuki Limnuti, the evil spirits, and Labartu, the witch hag series, besides many other texts dealing with magical practices. The Maklu series deals with spells against witches and wizards, images of whom are to be consumed by fire to the accompaniment of suitable spells and prayers. The Serpu series contains prayers and incantations against taboo. That against evil spirits provides the hunted with spells which will exorcise demons, ghosts, and the powers of the air generally, and place devils under a ban. In other magical tablets, the diseases to which poor humanity is prone are guarded against, and instructions are given on the manner in which they may be transferred to the dead bodies of animals, usually swine or goats. A toothache myth. The Assyrian physician had perforce to be something of a demonologist, as possession by devils was held to be the cause of diverse diseases, and we find incantations sprinkled among prescriptions. Occasionally, too, we come upon the fag end of a folk tale or dip momentarily into myth, as in a prescription for the toothache, compounded of fermented drink of the plant Sequilibir and oil, probably as efficacious in the case of the malady as most modern ones are. The story attached to the cure is as follows. When Anu had created the heavens, the earth created the rivers the canals, and the canals the marshes, which in turn created the worm. And the worm came weeping before Ea, saying, what wilt thou give me for my food? What wilt thou give me for my devouring? I will give thee ripe figs, replied the god, ripe figs and scented wood. Bah, replied the worm, what are ripe figs to me, or what is scented wood? Let me drink among the teeth and batten on the gums, that I may devour the blood of the teeth and the strength thereof. This tale alludes to a Babylonian superstition that worms consume the teeth. The word of power. As in Egypt, the word of power was held in great reverence by the magicians of Chaldea, who believed that the name, preferably the secret name of a god, possessed sufficient force in its mere syllables to defeat and scatter the hordes of evil things that surrounded and harassed mankind. The names of Ea and Merodach were perhaps most frequently used to carry destruction into the ranks of the demon army. It was also necessary to know the name of the devil or person against whom his spells were directed. If to this could be added a piece of hair or the nail parings in the case of a human being, then special efficacy was given to the enchantment. But just as hair or nails were part of a man, so was his name, and hence the great virtue ascribed to names in art magic, ancient and modern. The name was, as it were, the vehicle by means of which the magician established a link between himself and his victim. And the Babylonians, in exorcising sickness or disease of any kind, were wont to recite long catalogs of the names of evil spirits and demons, in the hope that by so doing, they might chance to light upon that especial individual who was the cause of the malady. Even long lists of names of persons who had died premature deaths were often recited in order to ensure that they would not return to torment the living. Babylonian vampires. In all lands and epochs, the grisly conception of the vampire has gained a strong hold upon the imagination of the common people, and this was no less the case in Babylonia and Assyria than elsewhere. There have not been wanting those who believed that vampirism was confined to the Slavonic race alone, and that the peoples of Russia, Bohemia, and the Balkan Peninsula were the sole possessors of the vampire legend. Recent research, however, has exposed the fallacy of this theory and has shown that, far from being the property of the Slavs or even of Aryan peoples, this horrible belief is or was the possession of practically every race, savage or civilized, that is known to anthropology. The 7 evil spirits of Assyria are, among other things, vampires of no uncertain type. An ancient poem which was chanted by them commences thus: 7 are they, 7 are they, in the ocean deep, 7 are they, battening in heaven, 7 are they, bred in the depths of the ocean, not male nor female are they, but are as the roaming wind blast. No wife have they, no son can they beget, knowing neither mercy nor pity. They hearken not to prayer, They are as horses reared amid the hills, the evil ones of Ea. Throne bearers to the gods are they. They stand in the highway to befoul the path. Evil are they, evil are they. Seven are they, seven are they. Twice seven are they. A fortnight. Destructive storms and evil winds are they, an evil blast that heraldeth the baneful storm, an evil blast, forerunner of the baleful storm. They are mighty children, mighty sons, heralds of the pestilence, throne bearers of Eriskagal. They are the flood which rusheth through the land. Seven gods of the broad earth, seven robbers gods are they, seven gods of might, seven evil demons of oppression, seven in heaven and seven on earth. Spirits that minish heaven and earth, that minish the land, spirits that minish the land of giant strength and giant tread, demons like raging bulls, great ghosts that break through all houses, demons that have no shame. Seven are they, knowing no care, they grind the lake like corn. Knowing no mercy, they rage against mankind. They spill their blood like rain, devouring their flesh and sucking their veins. They are demons full of violence, ceaselessly devouring blood. This last line clearly indicates their character as vampires. They are akin to the Rakshasas of India or the archdemons of Zoroastrianism. Such demons are also to be seen in the Polynesian tea, the Malayan Hantu Pinyadin, a dog-headed water demon, and the Kepu of the Karens, which under the form of a wizard's head and stomach devours human souls. Tyler considers vampires to be causes conceived in spiritual form to account for specific facts of wasting disease. Afanasev regards them as thunder gods and spirits of the storm who during winter slumber in their cloud coffins to rise again in spring and draw moisture from the clouds. But this theory will scarcely recommend itself to anyone with even a slight knowledge of mythological science. The Abe Calmet's difficulty in believing in vampires was that he could not understand how a spirit could leave its grave and return thence with ponderable matter in the form of blood, leaving no traces, showing that the surface of the earth above the grave had been stirred. But this view might be solved by the occult theory of the precipitation of matter. The Bible and magic. The earliest biblical account of anything supposed to be connected with magic is to be found in the history of Rachel, when with her sister Leah and her husband Jacob, she had left the house of her father. Rachel had stolen the images that were her father's. Then Laban overtook Jacob, and Laban said, "Yet wherefore hast thou stolen my gods?" And Jacob answered and said, "With whomsoever thou findest thy gods, let him not live. Before our brethren discern thou what is thine with me, and take it to thee." For Jacob knew not that Rachel had stolen them. And Laban went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent and into the two maidservants' tent, but he found them not. Then went he out of Leah's tent and entered into Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the images and put them in the camel's furniture and sat upon them. And Laban searched all the tent, but found them not. And she said to her father, Let it not displease my Lord that I cannot rise up before thee. And he searched but found not the images. This passage has given no little trouble to commentators, but most of them seem to consider these teraphim or images as something of a magical nature. The speaking head. The Targum of Jonathan ben Uziel gives the following version. And Rachel stole the images of her father, for they had murdered a man who was a firstborn son, and having cut off his head, they embalmed it with salt and spices, and they wrote divinations upon a plate of gold, and put it under his tongue, and placed it against the wall, and it conversed with them, and Laban worshipped it. And Jacob stole the science of Laban the Syrian, that he might not discover his departure. The Persian translation gives us astrolabes instead of teraphim, and implies that they were instruments used for judicial astrology, and that Rachel stole them to prevent her father from discovering their route. At all events, the teraphim were means of divination among believers and unbelievers. They were known among the Egyptians and among Syrians. What makes it extremely probable that they were not objects of religious worship is that it does not appear from any other passage of scripture that Laban was an idolater, besides which Rachel, who was certainly a worshiper of the true God, took them, it seems, on account of their supposed supernatural powers. It must, however, be observed that some have supposed these teraphim to have been talismans for the cure of diseases, and others that, being really idols, Rachel stole them to put a stop to her father's idolatry. There is a not very dissimilar account related in Judges of Micah and his teraphim, which seems sufficient to prove that the use of them was not considered inconsistent with the profession of the true religion. Gods once demons. Many of the Babylonian gods retained traces of their primitive demonical characteristics, and this applies to the great triad, Ea, Anu, and Enlil, who probably evolved into godhead from an animistic group of nature spirits. Each of these gods was accompanied by demon groups. Thus, the diseased demons were the beloved sons of Baal. The Fates were the 7 daughters of Anu, and the 7 storm demons, the children of Ea. In a magical incantation describing the primitive monster form of Ea, it is said that his head is like a serpent's. The ears are those of a basilisk. His horns are twisted into curls. His body is a sunfish full of stars. His feet are armed with claws, and the sole of his foot has no heel. Interesting. Ea was the great magician of the gods. His sway over the forces of nature was secured by the performance of magical rites, and his services were obtained by human beings who performed requisite ceremonies and repeated appropriate spells. Although he might be worshipped and propitiated in his temple at Eridu, he could also be conjured in mud huts. The latter, indeed, as in Mexico, appear to have been the oldest holy places. The legend of Ura, or Ura. It is told that Ura, the dread demon of disease, once made up his mind to destroy mankind, but Ishnu, his counselor, appeased him so that he abandoned his intention, and he gave humanity a chance of escape. Whoever should praise Ura and magnify his name would, he said, rule the four quarters of the world and should have none to oppose him. He should not die in pestilence, and his speech should bring him into favor with the great ones of the earth. Wherever a tablet with the Song of Europe was set up, in that house there should be immunity from the pestilence. As we read in the closing lines of the Gilgamesh epic, the dead were often left unburied in Babylonia, and the ghosts of those who were thus treated were, as in more modern times and climes, supposed to haunt the living until given proper sepulcher. They roamed the streets and byways, seeking for sustenance among the garbage in the gutters, and looking for haunted houses in which to dwell, denied as they were the shelter of the grave, which was regarded as the true home of the dead. They frequently terrified children into madness or death and bitterly mocked those in tribulation. They were, in fact, the outcasts of mortality, spiteful and venomous because they had not been properly treated. The modern race, which most nearly approximates to the Babylonian in its treatment of and attitude to the dead, seems to be the Burmese, who are extremely circumspect as to how they speak and act towards the inhabitants of the spirit world, as they believe that disrespect or mockery will bring down upon them misfortune or disease. An infinite number of guardian spirits is included in the Burman demonological system. These dwell in their houses and are the tutelars of village communities and even of clans. These are duly propitiated, at which ceremonies, rice, beer, and tea salad are offered to them. Women are employed as exorcists for driving out the evil spirits. Purification. Purification by water entered largely into Babylonian magic. The ceremony known as the incantation of Eridu, so frequently alluded to in Babylonian magical texts, was probably some form of purification by water, relating as it does to the home of Ea, the sea god. Another ceremony prescribes the mingling of water from a pool that no hand hath touched with tamarisk, masticol, ginger, alkali, and mixed wine. Therein must be placed a shining ring, and the mixture is then to be poured upon the patient. A root of saffron is then to be taken and pounded with pure salt and alkali and fat of the Maktu bird brought from the mountains, and with this strange mixture, the body of the patient is to be anointed. And you wonder why we have the bird flu. The chamber of the priest magician. Let us attempt to describe the treatment of a case by a priest physician magician of Babylonia. The proceeding is rather a recondite one, but by the aid of imagination as well as the assistance of Babylonian representation, we may construct a tolerably clear picture. The chamber of the sage is almost certain to be situated in some nook in one of those vast and imposing fanes which more closely resembled cities than mere temples. We draw the curtain and enter a rather darksome room. The atmosphere is pungent with chemic odors, and ranged on shelves disposed upon the tiled walls are numerous jars, great and small, containing the fearsome compounds which the practitioner applies to the sufferings of Babylonian humanity. The Asipu, shaven and austere, asks us what we desire of him, and in the role of Babylonian citizens, we acquaint him with the fact that our lives are made miserable for us by a witch who sends upon us misfortune after misfortune, now the blight or some equally intractable and horrible disease, now an evil wind, now unspeakable enchantments which torment us unceasingly. In his capacity of physician, the Asipu examines our bodies, shrunken and exhausted with fever or rheumatism, and having prescribed for us, compounds the mixture with his own hands and enjoins us to its regular application. He mixes various ingredients in a stone mortar, whispering his spells the while, with many a prayer to Ea, the beneficent, and Merodach, the all-powerful, that we may be restored to health. Then he promises to visit us at our dwelling and gravely bids us adieu after expressing the hope that we will graciously contribute to the upkeep of the house of religion to which he is attached. Leaving the darkened haunt of the Asipu for the brilliant sunshine of a Babylonian summer afternoon, we are at first inclined to forget our fears and to laugh away the horrible superstitions, the relics of barbarian ancestors, which weigh us down. But as night approaches, we grow more fearful. We crouch with the children in the darkest corner of our clay brick dwelling and tremble at every sound. The rushing of the wind overhead is for us the noise of the Labartu, the hag demon, come hither to tear from tis our little ones, or perhaps a rat rustling in the straw may seem to us the Alu demon. The ghost of the dead giver at the threshold, and even pale Uni, lord of disease, himself may glance in at the tiny window with ghastly countenance and eager red eyes. The pains of rheumatism assail us. Ha! The evil witch is at work, thrusting thorns into waxen images made in our shape, that we may suffer the torments brought about by sympathetic magic, to which we would rather refer our aches than to the circumstance that we dwell hard by the river swamps. A loud knocking resounds at the door. We tremble anew, and the children scream. At last, the dread powers of evil have come to summon us to the final ordeal, or perhaps the witch herself, grown bold by reason of her immunity, has come to wreak fresh vengeance. The flimsy door of boards is thrown open, and to our unspeakable relief, the stern face of the Asipu appears beneath the flickering light of the taper. We shout with joy, and the children cluster around the priest, clinging to his garments and clasping his knees. The witch finding. The priest smiles at our fear and, motioning us to sit in a circle, produces several waxen figures of demons, which he places on the floor. It is noticeable that these figures all appear to be bound with miniature ropes. Taking one of these in the shape of a labertu or hag demon, the priest places before it 12 small cakes made from a peculiar kind of meal. He then pours out a libation of water, placing the image of a small black dog beside that of the witch, lays a piece of the heart of a young pig on the mouth of the figure, and some white bread and a box of ointment beside it. He then chants something like the following. May a guardian spirit be present at my side when I draw near unto the sick man, when I examine his muscles, when I compose his limbs, when I sprinkle the water of Ea upon him. Avoid thee whether thou art an evil spirit or an evil demon, an evil ghost or an evil devil, an evil god or an evil fiend, hag, demon, ghoul, sprite, phantom, or wraith, or any disease, fever, headache, shivering, or any sorcery, spell, or enchantment. Having recited some such words of power, the Asipo then directs us to keep the figure at the head of our bed for 3 nights, then to bury it beneath the earthen floor. But alas, no cure results. The witch still torments us by day and night, and once more we have recourse to the priest doctor. The ceremony is gone through again, but still the family health does not improve. The little ones suffer from fever, and bad luck consistently dogs us. After a stormy scene between husband and wife, who differ regarding the qualifications of the Asipu, another practitioner is called in. He is younger and more enterprising than the last, and he has not yet learned that half the business of the physician is to nurse his patients in the financial sense of the term. Whereas the elderly Asipu had gone quietly home to bed after prescribing for us, this young physician, who has his spurs to win after being consulted, goes home to his clay surgery and hunts up a likely exorcism. Next day, armed with this wordy weapon, he arrives at our dwelling and, placing a waxen image of the witch upon the floor, vents upon it the full force of his rhetoric. As he is on the point of leaving, screams resound from a neighboring cabin. Bestowing upon us a look of the deepest meaning, our Asipu darts to the hut opposite and hails forth an ancient crone, whose appearance of age and illness give her a most sinister look. At once we recognize in her a wretch who dared to menace our children when in innocent play they cast hot ashes upon her thatch and introduced hot swamp water into her cistern. In righteous wrath we lay hands on the abandoned being who for so many months has cast a blight upon our lives. She exclaims that the pains of death had seized upon her, and we laugh in triumph, for we know that the superior magic of our Asipu has taken effect. On the way to the river, we are joined by neighbors who rejoice with us that we have caught the witch. Great is the satisfaction of the party when at last the devilish crone is cast headlong into the stream. But ere many seconds pass, we begin to look incredulously upon each other, for the wicked one refuses to sink. This means that she is innocent. Then, awful moment, we find every eye directed upon us. We who were so happy and lighthearted but a moment before. We tremble, for we know how severe are the laws against the indiscriminate accusation of those suspected of witchcraft. As the ancient crone continues to float, a loud murmuring arises in the crowd, and with quaking limbs and eyes full of terror, we snatch up our children and make a dash for freedom. Luckily, the Asipu accompanies us so that the crowd dare not pursue, and indeed, so absurdly changeable is human nature, most of them are busied in rescuing the old woman. In a few minutes, we have placed all immediate danger of pursuit behind us. The Asipu has departed to his temple, richer in the experience by the lesson of a false prescription, quote unquote. After a hurried consultation, we quit the town, skirt the arable land which fringes it, and plunge into the desert. She who was opposed to the employment of a young and inexperienced Asipu does not make matters any better by reiterating, "I told you so." And he who favored a second opinion on paying a night visit to the city discovers that the quote unquote witch has succumbed to her harsh treatment, that his house has been made over to her relatives by way of compensation, and that a legal process has been taken out against him. Returning to his wife, he acquaints her with the sad news, and hand in hand with their weeping offspring, they turn and face the desert. The magic circle. The magic circle, as in use among the Chaldean sorcerers, bears many points of resemblance to that described in medieval works on magic. The Babylonian magician, when describing the circle, made 7 little winged figures, which he set before an image of the god Nergal. After doing so, he stated that he had covered them with a dark robe and bound them with a colored cord, setting beside them tamarisk and the heart of the palm, that he had completed the magic circle and had surrounded them with a sprinkling of lime and flour. That the magic circle of medieval times must have been evolved from the Chaldean is plain from the strong resemblance between the two. Directions for the making of a medieval magic circle are as follows. In the first place, the magician is supposed to fix upon a spot proper for such a purpose, which must be either in a subterranean vault, hung round with black and lighted by a magical torch, or else in the center of some thick wood or desert, or upon some extensive unfrequented plain where several roads meet, or amidst the ruins of ancient castles, abbeys, or monasteries, or among the rocks on the seashore in some private detached churchyard, or any other melancholy place between the hours of 12 and 1 in the night, either when the moon shines very bright, or else when the elements are disturbed with storms of thunder, lightning, wind, and rain. For in these places, times, and seasons, it is contended that spirits can with less difficulty manifest themselves to mortal eyes and continue visible with the least pain. When the proper time and place are fixed upon, a magic circle is to be formed within which the master and his associates are carefully to retire. The reason assigned by magicians and others for the institution and use of the circles is that so much ground being blessed and consecrated by holy words and ceremonies has a secret force to expel all evil spirits from the bounds thereof, and being sprinkled with sacred water, the ground is purified from all uncleanness. Beside the holy names of God being written over every part of it, its force becomes proof against all evil spirits. Babylonian demons. Babylonian demons were legion, and most of them exceedingly malevolent. The Utuku was an evil spirit that lurked generally in the desert, where it lay in wait for unsuspecting travelers, but it did not confine its haunts to the more barren places, for it was also to be found among the mountains, in graveyards, and even in the sea. An evil fate befell the man upon whom it looked. The Ravisu is another lurking demon that secretes itself in unfrequented spots to leap upon passers-by. The Labartu, which has already been alluded to, is strangely enough spoken of as the daughter of Anu. She was supposed to dwell in the mountains or in marshy places and was particularly addicted to the destruction of children. Babylonian mothers were wont to hang charms round their children's necks to guard them against this horrible hag. The Sedu appears to have been in some senses a guardian spirit and in others a being of evil propensities. It is often appealed to at the end of invocations along with the Lamasu, a spirit of a similar type. These malign influences were probably the prototypes of the Arabian jinn, to whom they have many points of resemblance. Many Assyrian spirits were half human and half supernatural, and some of them were supposed to contract humans unions with human beings, like the Arabian jinn. The offspring of such unions was supposed to be a spirit called Alu, which haunted ruins and deserted buildings, and indeed entered the houses of men like a ghost to steal their sleep. Ghosts proper were also common enough, as has already been observed, and those who had not been buried were almost certain to return to harass humankind. It was dangerous even to look upon a corpse, lest the spirit or edimu of the dead man should seize upon the beholder. The Assyrians seemed to be of the opinion that a ghost like a vampire might drain away the strength of the living, and long formula were in existence containing numerous names of haunting spirits, one of which it was hoped would apply to the tormenting ghost, and these were used for the purposes of exorcism. To lay a spirit, the following articles were necessary: 7 small loaves of roast corn, the hoof of a dark colored ox, flour of roast corn, and a little leaven. The ghosts were then asked why they tormented the haunted man, after which the flour and leaven were kneaded into a paste in the horn of an ox, and a small libation poured into a hole in the earth. The leavened dough was then placed in the hoof of an ox, and another libation poured out with an incantation to the god Shamash. In another case, figures of the dead man and the living person to whom the spirit has appeared are to be made, and libations poured out before both of them. Then the figure of the dead man is to be buried, and that of the living man washed in pure water, the whole ceremony being typical of sympathetic magic, which thus supposed the burial of the body of the ghost and the purification of the living man. In the morning, incense was to be offered up before the sun god at his rising, when sweet woods were to be burned and a libation of sesame wine poured out. If a human being was troubled by a ghost, it was necessary that he should be anointed with various substances in order that the result of the ghostly contact might be nullified. An old text says, "When a ghost appeareth in the house of a man, there will be a destruction of that house. When it speaketh and hearkeneth for an answer, the man will die, and there will be lamentation." The belief in taboo was universal in ancient Chaldea. Amongst the Babylonians, it was known as Mamit. There were taboos on many things, but especially upon corpses and uncleanness of all kinds. We find the taboo generally alluded to in a text as the barrier that none can pass. Among all barbarous peoples, the taboo usually intended to hedge in the sacred thing from the profane person or the common people, but it may also be employed for sanitary reasons. Thus, the flesh of certain animals, such as the pig, may not be eaten in hot countries. Food must not be prepared by those who are in the slightest degree suspected of uncleanness, and these laws are usually of the most rigorous character. But should a man violate the taboo placed upon certain foods, then he himself often became taboo. Okay, we read all that. So, popular superstitions. The superstition that the evil eye of a witch or a wizard might bring blight upon an individual or community was as persistent in Chaldea as elsewhere. We read that. We read the omens. Okay, so this is pretty much just a snippet of what um, what goes on in Babylon in the dark. So something in the way of Alexander the Great. I keep running across Alexander the Great. So it says Alexander the Great transferred the Babylonian script and wove it into the Greek Septuagint from the incantation of Eridu, a city built by Cain for his son Enoch. Incantation, or a recipe of chicken and saffron. Australasian bittern. It's bitten. It's Biden. Looks like a nocturnal member of the heron or Mick heron family, frequenting swamps and marshy places to anoint the patient, a turkey basting. Okay, let's see. Marshlands near me. Jeffersons, all about the Jeffersons. Which states have marshlands? The wetlands of the United States. Okay, so found on every continent except for Antarctica, wetlands come in a wide variety of shapes and sizes and hydrological, ecological, and geological conditions. Across the group, the unifying feature for this diverse landscape is the dominance of water. A wetland is an area where water covers the soil or lies at or just below the surface for all or parts of the year, including the growing season. This saturation will in turn determine the type of vegetation found in the wetland, favoring water-loving hydrophytic species, and will encourage the development of wetland or hydric soils. Across the globe, this water dominance is expressed in many ways due to the differences in regional climate geology and hydrology, and thus no two wetlands will be the same. In fact, seasonal changes alone may be enough to render a single wetland unrecognizable from one month to the next. For this reason, it can be difficult to look for and protect our wetlands. Will we know them when we see them? Okay, so let's see. Alabama. A good place to find wetlands in Alabama is Wheeler National Wildlife Refuge. Established in 1938 by President Franklin Roosevelt, this area was designed to be a home and breeding ground for migratory birds and other wildlife. Today, it is designated as a waterfowl refuge primarily for ducks and geese, and it supports the state's largest wintering concentration of these species. Wheeler NWR contains a tremendous variety of wetland habitat, including bottomland hardwood forest and tupelo swamps, allowing the site to support over 295 species of birds and a multitude of fish, reptiles, amphibians, mammals, and freshwater mussels. So in Alaska, about 43% of the state, or 174.7 million acres, is considered a wetland. That's more than all of the wetlands of the contiguous United States combined. something about Alaska. Arizona is home to a wide variety of wetlands. 4,000-acre Topok Marsh, Pintail Slough, or Imperial National Wildlife Refuge. California's wetland area has shrunk by 90%. Colorado, temperatures can reach as high as 120 degrees. Okay, I'm looking for swamplands. Are there swamps in Illinois? Here we go. 2 beautiful swamps that may be visited are located at the LaRue Swamp Nature Preserve in Union County and Huron Pond Little Black Slough or Slaw Nature Preserve. What does it say? The Huron family. Huron Pond. Huron Pond. Not Huron, but Huron. Huron Pond. Vienna, Illinois. The Cache River or Cache River, Southern Illinois. Let's read about it. So Huron Pond Little Black Slough Nature Preserve, also known simply as Huron Pond, is a parcel of protected wetland property located in Belknap, Illinois, approximately 5 miles or 8 kilometers southwest of Vienna in Johnson County. It was designated a National Natural Landmark in 1972. As part of the Cache River Basin, it is classified as a wetland of international importance under the Ramsar Convention. Huron Pond Little Black Slough Nature Preserve protects a swath of Cache River drainage upstream from the Post Creek Cutoff. Its biology and geology are representative of the Coastal Plain Natural Division in Illinois, which is the northernmost extent of the Gulf Coastal Plain in North America. It combines upland limestone bluffs, Wildcat Bluff, Cache River floodplain, and a drier mesic woodland called Boss Island. The wetland sections of this nature preserve protect several old growth stands of bald cypress and water tupelo and a heron rookery. As of 2023, the Illinois State Champion Cherry Bark Oak can be viewed from the Todd Fink Huron Pond hiking trail. The name of the Wildcat Bluff upland may commemorate one of the nature preserve's top carnivores, the bobcat. River otters can also be found at Huron Pond. Bird watchers visit Huron Pond, Little Black Slough to search for a variety of raptors, including the black vulture, red-shouldered hawk, and the barred owl, and enjoy a variety of songbirds, including the Kentucky warbler and the yellow-throated warbler. Today, the Huron Pond Little Black Slough Nature Preserve Complex comprises 1,861 acres or 753 hectares of land accessible from U.S. Highway 45. In terms of area, it is the largest natural area owned and operated by the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. A floating boardwalk that is part of the Todd Fink Heron Pond Trail allows visitors to enter the bald cypress / water tupelo swamp. The name of the small nearby town of Cypress, Illinois, appears to commemorate the cypress trees of the upper Cache River drainage, including the groves now protected within the Heron Pond Little Black Slaw Nature Preserves. Creature. The lion. The bobcat. Let's see. The bobcat. In the Bible, bobcats symbolize agility, stealth, and adaptability. They are often associated with the idea of being cautious and discerning in one's actions. Bobcats can also represent the need for independence and self-reliance, as they are solitary animals. Bobcat. Predatory animals will eat no meat but grass. Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. Now there was there nigh unto the mountains a great herd of swine feeding, and all the devils besought him, saying, Send us into the swine. Here we go again. Okay. Ham. Mark 'em, got 'em, burn 'em. Consider the ravens. They do not sow or reap. They have no storeroom or barn, yet God feeds them. And how much more valuable you are than birds. Okay, we're going to end it there. I'm going to come back with a part 2 in regards to this chicken dish. This chicken dish of the heron, Nick Herons. 1, 2, 4, Daddy on the clock. All right, guys. Thanks again for listening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Love ya.